Hello, and how are you doing? Welcome to another Facebook Live here from the Marshals Museum in Fort Smith, Arkansas, USA. I know it's an odd thing. It seems like the stream started up on time and with the correct audio and everything, so we'll, I'm sure, find out something else is going wrong later on. As a result of everything else that we've had going on lately, I decided, especially with last week being as serious as it was, I wanted to go a little bit lighter this week. Thanks again to everybody who showed up last week for the special that we did regarding 9/11. If you want to go see any of the stuff that happened as a result of that, by all means, jump back on and after we get done here, hopefully, and you can watch last week's Facebook Live where we were talking about United States Marshals Service and their response to 9/11 and how that worked and turned out. And you just don't mind me for a second. I just want to make sure everything looks like it's going well, and I'm happy to see that. If you followed us on socials, you would know that today is going to be Ask a Curator. Every year across the United States, let me pull my phone out because it's buzzing at me like an angry bee. If you follow the museum field in the United States, the third Wednesday of September every year is I just want to make sure that no messages are coming in for this. Awesome, good. Third Wednesday of every September is Ask a Curator Day. And so what happens is museum professionals across the country and even around the world are following Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and other social media outlets to look for postings asking for questions about information about museum business. If you want to have a question about, if you're a curator, what would you do about this particular issue? Or I have this in my collection at home, I want to take care of it. How do I do that? And so one of the things that I was unable to do this year is participate in that because I had a number of things going on here at the museum that kept me busy and out of trouble. So today, seeing as how I wanted to take part and I wanted to answer questions, and I know a lot of the folks here in the audience end up with questions at different points, I wanted to make sure that I was going to be able to answer any questions that you might have specifically about museums, about curation, about what it is we do to take care of things. I'm also going to expand that into dealing with museums, anything along those lines. So if you have a question that you want to catch, by all means, feel free to throw it at us. We are more than happy to look at anything that you guys have in the way of questions. Anything that you guys want to throw out there. Anything having to do with how the museum here takes care of stuff. If I've got something at home in a collection, I've got, say, a photograph that's curling up, something of my grandparents, and I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to straighten this out. I don't know if I should remove something. I don't know how to take care of the old quilt that's a hand-me-down. I've got a lot of old stuff sitting around that I think should go to a museum. And so I want to talk about some of those issues I know are general issues a lot of people have. I am also going to try and answer some other questions along those lines. But before I do that, a couple things I want to plug. Here at the museum, the building is built. I'm sitting right in the middle of it. I get the pleasure to be here 5 days a week doing my job and trying to make sure that everything behind me is taken care of, as well as trying to continue to do work to make sure that the museum can do its job and support everybody else's operations. Whether that's the Constitution Week we just completed. If you didn't know, yesterday was the 233rd birthday of the United States Constitution. If you haven't read it for a while, please sit down and read it. There's a lot of stuff in there that people have been told is in there that's not. Bill of Rights, the other 17 amendments. For those of you who regularly watch, you remember me getting schooled a few weeks ago talking about women's suffrage when I was called out because I couldn't remember how many amendments to the Constitution there are. I'm not going to forget that number anytime soon. To help support the museum, though, you can do it in a very tangible manner. You can jump onto our webpage and sponsor a brick. The bricks with like your name on it, someone you love, in memory of a particular deputy. There are several bricks that we have based around the about Bass Reeves, other famous deputies who were here in the region. We also have other ways to do it. If you want to jump on, we have our GoFundMe campaign, which is available. We also have a number of other ways, the most recent of which is just right here. It's a face mask. This one's still in the wrapping. I'm not going to take it out. I would be able to show you mine on my face, but this particular mask, my mask, I think is sitting at home on the floor where I dropped it this morning. At least I'm hoping that's where it's at, because otherwise I'm going to have to buy a new one. And yes, we have to buy these too once we got past our first one. So you can buy a mask off of the museum store page. That's $10 for the masks. I do not believe that's shipping included, but if you live here in the Fort Smith area, I am sure we can arrange for you to come here and pick it up here at the museum. With other aspects of what we have going on here at the museum, been very busy, and again, trying to take care of what we have here in the collection, which really, I want to start out with what's behind me to help talk about specifically the one of the main ways we talk about, like the main ways that we take care of the objects in our collection, and this goes for any museum curator at pretty much any museum you're going to come across. And the primary way to take care of it is what I'm breathing right now. It's air that's 68, 70 degrees, around 50% humidity relative, and we try to keep the light at a level that normally the lights behind me are not on, just to help save some both electricity, but it's also to save the energy that's being applied to any of the objects that are exposed back there. All of the lights that we have in the museum are LED lights. They are not incandescent or ultraviolet lights like the big tube lights. Incandescent and ultraviolet lights, well, obviously the big tube lights, the UV lights, they put out ultraviolet. The incandescents, the ones like what you'll probably have at home, granted, everybody is starting to switch over to LED lights. The LED lights are so much better for any of the objects. It's amazing the damage that can be done over time with light energy, but especially ultraviolet light over time. So there's some questions on that. That's a real simple thing. One question I did receive from someone is essentially on the subject of how do you date something in a museum collection? And I had a smart aleck answer to that I would have liked to have given regarding finding a good restaurant first. But for a lot of what we're doing with museum work, part of nailing down the provenance on something is finding out how old it is. Is it as old as somebody claims it to be? And so for for most dating of materials, a lot of times if it's a document, usually especially an official document, the age is right there on the paper. If it is a firearm, for example, or any other manufactured good, there is usually going to be a set time frame when that particular make model is manufactured, and there will be a serial number quite often identifying some of those objects, especially the firearms behind me. The serial numbers with most manufacturers are very well known and can nail it down within a year, at most a couple of years. Winchesters are notably bad around the turn of the century. 1892 and 1894 Winchesters, there was some really bad information that got out about manufacturing of them. Most listings of firearms from that time frame, late 1890s into the early 1900s, are usually 3 or 4 or 5 years off. I've actually done some first-hand basis research and gotten published with some of that research. So we can talk a little bit about that. The other things that we have going on with the with anything that we have are trying to nail down specific tells about the objects. If it's a photograph, find out where the photograph is, find out what buildings are in the photograph, find out what people are in the photograph. There are photographs of people I've been able to say, so somebody says, this is John Smith in this photograph, and you're able to say, no, that's not John Smith, because John Smith died in this particular year, this particular event took place, or this particular building didn't exist at this location. And so we're able to do that. So dating, it's piecemeal. Once you get to something that doesn't have easy ways to tell those dates, at that point you're dealing with having to look at particular objects and having a knowledge of that object. So whether you're talking about porcelain, glass, textiles, clothing is a really good field for identifying stuff like that. A lot of clothing is set up with different styles. So even especially through the 20th century and even back into the 19th century, women's clothing especially, very stylistic differences every 5 or so years. So finding somebody to deal with that. For more manageable ways to take care of things, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my picture-in-picture and show you some fun toys that we have here in the collection. Actually, I'll go ahead and I'll put this on full screen. There we go. And so this, I decided to go ahead and pull out my kit. I carry a nice little bag that has, a little neoprene bag, has a lot of stuff in it that I use for museum care, especially if I'm traveling someplace. And in this particular case, I have cotton gloves right here. I've got my nitrile gloves here, and I usually carry a few sets of nitrile gloves. These are like the nitrile exam gloves that you'll see doctors use at hospitals or clinics. I wear them very differently for very different purposes. I've had times on here where I've talked about wearing gloves specifically for different purposes. Like I'll not wear gloves if I'm handling paper products. A lot of materials that might be slippery, I'll tend to wear the nitrile gloves so I can get a little bit more of a solid grip. Some other materials I'll wear cotton. It also depends on just what I have handy at the time. A lot of people wonder, Dave, why do you always carry around a bunch of toothbrushes? And these are old toothbrushes of mine or my kids or my wife's. And once we get done using them and switch up to another toothbrush, run through the dishwasher, these are about the most effective things you're going to find for cleaning stuff. It gets dirt out of nooks and crannies, and then also one of the other things is that it's something that by the time you get done with them on your teeth, these are going to be worn down to the point where they're going to be soft enough that they're not going to really damage anything that you're going to come across. The last thing you want to do with anything is use something like this copper brush to do something because the copper is still going to scratch some of the stuff you'll come across. And I even have, like, this toothbrush is an older toothbrush of mine, and that's because all of this right here is because of gun oil and things like that, because some of these brushes I specifically use just for firearms, just again because I'm a gun guy, I'm a gun historian, and that's some of the things that I do as part of my job. For some of the other things that we have here, I've got a nice little soft tape measure. You can get one of these tape measures at Walmart or something like that, where it's nice and soft, finds out measurements. I've got a little ruler, and a lot of this is because we want to find out measurements with a micrometer. We want to find out measurements on different materials and find out how big something is, especially like when you're dealing with certain objects, knowing the difference between down to 16th, 32nd of an inch, or in metric, if you're dealing in millimeters or smaller, it becomes very important to have an idea to help identify the difference between two different objects. Again, back to firearms, you're dealing with cartridges especially. For a number of things, I have either this set of dental picks that I use. That helps clean out crud that's down inside, and depending on what's going on, I might use one of these patches to help clean out or get into tight spots. If it's something I'm worried about, scratching, you can also get a set of these plastic picks that have the same stuff. They're just hard plastic, and you don't have to worry about scratching the materials. And then you can get, like, every once in a while you can find some little things like this is a little cheap microscope that allows you to see certain things up close. It's got a light. And then handy dandy screwdriver. The thing that I always want to warn people about, though, with screwdrivers is that the easiest way to damage any metal object is to put a screwdriver up against it, because unless your driver heads your bits are just perfect for the slot that you're going into, the easiest way to scratch a finish is to use the wrong size bits. I have a friend who is a conservator in the museum field. Conservator basically being somebody who takes care of special materials or specific objects to make sure that the objects are cleaned and processed, and they will not degrade. And so some of these processes might involve putting special waxes on metal objects, taking materials apart and cleaning them, using particular types of vacuums, particular types of other equipment, brushes, to clean objects and make sure that they are in good shape to last a very long time. And so with screwdrivers, this friend of mine who's a firearms conservator, if you walked into his shop, he would have a rack of about 3 or 4 tiers with 30 or 40 screwdrivers. He would every weekend go around to garage sales and find old screwdrivers, and then he would take those screwdrivers and would individually file each one for the screw head that he needed. He was dealing primarily with mid-1800s and earlier firearms. And so those screws may not be something that's a standard size today. So he would make sure that he had the screws, the drivers set just right and filed down so they would fit those screw heads, and then use proper pressure to do that. Because otherwise, if you're using your screwdriver incorrectly, you can very easily take your screwdriver, and as you torque it, it would tear up out of the screw, damaging the screw head, but it would also could skitter across and damage the firearm as well. So, and then one of my other favorite things is I've got this huge pack of cotton swabs, and you can use these to get in and clean pretty much anything you want to if you're doing a lot of cleaning. And then, depending on what you're doing, every screw head, every driver bit you can think of you might ever need. So I carry that one around if I'm going to do, if I know that I'm going to be doing some sort of work that's needed for cataloging and accessioning. And cataloging and accessioning, those are just taking objects into the museum collection, processing them so we know how big they are, what they are, identifying all the different aspects and variations. And it's just a process that happens at every museum you ever see. Which that leads to another question that I come across is, how can I get something to your museum? And it's not necessarily our museum in general, that's just, our museum in particular, but in museums across the country, I see this happen on a daily basis. I've seen this happen in museums, the museum here, Marshals Museum. I saw it when I was in Cody, Wyoming at what was then the Buffalo Bill Historic Center. I was a curator at the Cody Firearms Museum. When I was at Enid, Oklahoma at the Cherokee Strip Regional Heritage Center. And I hear this from friends of mine and acquaintances through the museum field all across the country, is these horror stories of materials that come to the museum as gifts. There is a classic line about, I thought of you as I was driving to the dump. And then I've actually had people mention that we were driving this out to the dump to throw it away, but then we thought about you guys, because there's an idea that, well, because this material is old, the museum will want it. And that's not always the case. The worst thing that you can have as a museum sometimes is a curator who can't say no. If you are a curator at a museum, your responsibility first and foremost is to that museum and to the collection at hand. Just because somebody you know is a nice, wonderful older person and they have some really neat stuff and you may not want to say no to them, you really need to know when to say no. And so what guides us in that is, for the museum here, our mission and vision statement. The mission of the U.S. Marshals Museum is to form a national center of learning, heritage, and legacy for the accomplishments of the U.S. Marshals Service through a robust educational programming, including seminars, lecture series, and special events. We will disseminate knowledge and information. In our vision to inspire Americans across the country now and future generations to live with the core values of the U.S. Marshals Service: justice, integrity, and service. And as part of those, that whole idea that we're here to tell that story of the Marshals Service. If someone shows up and they have material related to Fort Smith Police Department, some county in Oklahoma, like somebody's grandfather was a police officer back east or out west, or just this is something related to Judge Parker, that doesn't help us tell our story about the Marshals. So there have been a number of folks who get disappointed when I say no. We treat them very kindly and we try to work with that, and we try to find a place. If it's in my past, anytime that it's something that we do not particularly want that would help us as a museum, I try to find another place for those materials to go. So oh, there we go, lights went off. This is what happens when you work, there we are. This is what happens. I knew something technological would happen today. This is what happens when you work in a place where you try to make sure you save energy by having lights that go off after you don't move for 20 minutes. Guess how long I've been sitting here. So I try to find materials. If it's related to Judge Parker, I suggest either the Fort Smith Museum of History or the Fort Smith National Historic Site. If it is something related to local law enforcement, I suggest they talk to their county or city historical society, or if there's a particular organization, some police organizations have their own museums. And I suggest that to people as a direction that they can go. For a lot of other things, I mean, it's very disappointing sometimes. I know that if, for example, old typewriters, old pianos, old pump organs, there's a lot of things like that that really shouldn't be taken to museums, because most museums don't want them unless you're a museum specifically of typewriters, pianos, or pump organs. There are some amazing things that people have in their collections, especially hobbyists. Something that came up here in our local community this last week was the question: somebody has a train set that they set up that's based loosely on the downtown area of Fort Smith. And I enjoy trains like a lot of people. I saw the images that they had on Facebook, and a number of people were suggesting, there were a huge number of folks on there were suggesting that these materials go to either the local Fort Smith Museum of History, to the National Historic Site, or even to the Marshals Museum. And I did not comment directly towards any of that, but I did leave a comment that was essentially that a lot of museums may not want to have these objects because they don't support the mission of the museum. A train set that, and I've seen this actually where I used to live in Oklahoma, we were offered things like this a number of times, models that people had done of the local area. And I know it's very difficult to refuse, but these models of the area, they very rarely tell a story that the museum wants to be able to tell, or that will help them tell their story that helps support the mission. And so it's a very difficult subject to get into sometimes with some folks. And some museum people don't like to talk about it too much. Some local community members in different places around the country, they get angry when the museum says no. But a lot of us, we have a finite amount of space. And there are a lot of museums around the country that have accepted way too much stuff that didn't need to be accepted. And so that can end up being a problem, and it's a drain on the museum resources as well. So that leads to hard decisions at some point. But yeah, for the museum is not going back to their collections management policy or to their mission to talk about what it is that they'll take, why they'll take it, what process they go through, or even more importantly, how they will deaccession it in the future. Deaccession is the process a museum will go through to remove something from the collection. So if there's something in the collection back here that we find out this does not have anything to do with the Marshals Service, or and it does not help us tell the story of the Marshals Service. There are pieces behind me. A number of the firearms here have no real serious tie to the story of the Marshals Service, but they help us tell that story through the fact of either allowing people to understand the technology being used. They can become hands-on pieces for educational programs. There's a lot, or just even props that we can have out on exhibit to in a place where we're worried about damaging an object that is original to the period and might be more directly tied to the story. And just mentioning firearms, that's always a question that we get, is how do you take care of the guns? And it's the same way we take care of everything else. You keep it in a good environment and then you don't touch it. The easiest way to damage anything in a museum collection, much less like your own home, is just simply to touch it. You handle an object and you carry it around, it'll bang into a door, it'll bang into a table, you have a chance that you're going to step on a pencil that you dropped on the floor and slip and fall, and it's going to hit the ground. You take a picture, if you're not carrying the picture in two hands the right way, the frame can come apart. And there's a lot of different ways that we have to be very, very careful. Most of the time, if I'm moving an object from one part of the building to another, I'm going to have that object, I don't care how small it is, on a Rubbermaid cart that, actually let me go ahead. There's a couple of my Rubbermaid carts over there that we use to transport materials around the building. And so we try to take care of things the best way that we can. We try to make sure that, again, objects are with us not just now, but 20, 30, not just 20, 30 years from now, but 50 and 100 and 200 years from now. So that's why we try to take care of things the best way we can. We try to make sure that we continue to do our job in a way that allows us to complete our mission and to tell the story that we're trying to tell. Marshal Service is now, as of this next, Wednesday, is going to be 231 years old. And it's an amazing, awesome story and a responsibility to be able to tell that story. And as the curator, the caretaker of materials behind me, and the person who gets to support a lot of other educational programs and a lot of other public-facing programs in the museum, it's an awesome responsibility. So we get to go through and do a lot of things that are very beneficial to the collection. If anybody who's watching right now has a question, I would be more than happy. I know that we're coming up on a half hour here. I know I've talked about a few of my pet subjects regarding how to take care of things in the museum. I answered one question about how you date something that's in the collection. And just trying to find out the best way to work with what we have and deal with those objects that we want to take care of that help us tell that story. If anyone has any questions at all, I would be more than happy. Otherwise, I think what I'm probably going to do is I'll tell you about one more thing that is a responsibility of mine as a museum curator, and I will give that as an opportunity for somebody's question to come in, and then I will go on and let's all have a fun weekend. But part of my job is to make sure I know where everything back there is, and so to do that I have to do an inventory every year, and this is my hard copy of the inventory. We have a collections database that sits on my computer and is backed up in two places to make sure that if the building burns down, we know what was here, or if that computer fries and the hard drive goes because, well, technology, we have backups that we can use to help restore all of our information. But that's also why I keep a hard copy of the inventory as well, and again, it's another copy. If electricity goes down, if the power goes out, if all of a sudden we're back in the Stone Age, I have a paper version of this. And for all of this, I have, for each one of these objects in our collection, I know what it is, I know where its location is. Everything here has a specific number. And we number those objects just like every museum numbers their objects in a particular way to make sure that we know which one this is. We might have 5 different patches or 5 different credentials folders, or 3 or 4 different badges that are all the exact same description, that when you set them all next to each other, they all look the same. And so what we can do is, using these numbers and hang tags, and there's other ways to identify them, we can use that information to help us figure out which one is which. This one belongs to that, this one came from this person, this one tells that story. And so we can identify each of these individually, and so we can make sure we know the difference between them all. I also keep track of, on this list, of specifically what it is. I've got a spotting telescope, a gun case, just right here. I've got a holster, a revolver, a docket, drinking bottle, magazine, like an actual magazine, not a firearms magazine, sealing wax, Derringer, law enforcement uniforms. I have an oil lamp. I have personnel records, proclamations, military uniforms, pendants, charms, necklaces, revolver, a variety of knives, weapons, things like that. And so each one of these has its own name, its own type of storage that we have. And as we move forward in time, we're going to be getting them into better storage as we get closer to opening. We also keep track of any other numbers that might be on there to help identify. So, for example, if a shelf were to fail and fall over, we'd be able to, or if we lost the tag somewhere, I'd be able to take a particular, I'd be able to take that object and take whatever other number that is, whether it's just off the serial number for firearms. I can take the serial number, punch that into a field in our computer, and it tells me, oh, that's actually this firearm, and it goes there. So I can keep track of all of this stuff. And then that's just part of the responsibility of being a curator. Let's see here. What do I use to label a metal artifact? From Mike Sheriff over in Oklahoma. And I see Sharon Theobald popped in and say hello. Hello, Sharon. Mike, for the, and let's see, I might have gotten a, let's see. Hold on a second. I've got, just want to see if this other question, nope, that's not what I thought that was. The way that we put metal, like for metal objects, the way that we label them, quite often we'll just do a hang tag. So say, especially with firearms, they've got those nice little handy trigger guards that we can, hold on one second. Okay. I'll have to take care of that here in a bit. I've got just a number of things going on today. There's a wedding tomorrow at the museum, but they're getting things done. There's a guy looking at some windows that need to be cleaned. There's other things that we're taking care of in the way of museum business. So back to labeling metal objects. There is, with firearms especially, just running a hang tag through the trigger guard. The next step is something I like to do, is there's a wonderful material called acryloid B72, and then there's a couple of other related materials. As its name kind of sounds, it is an acrylic. It is suspended in a mineral spirits or similar media. So it's almost like what looks like airplane, like liquid glue. And so what you can do is you brush it on, and as soon as the liquid element evaporates as a very low evaporative point, it evaporates, leaving a sheet of plastic, of acrylic, that you can later on remove with mineral spirits. And so what I do, let me answer this question really quickly. I am sorry. That's so many different things going on today. So what I do is I put on a little layer, usually inside, like someplace that's not easily seen. Then I will take an object number, print it out on a sheet of paper, so it's very, very small, cut around that small piece, set that down on where I've brushed out the acryloid, set that down, brush another bit of acryloid over it, and so you've encapsulated that piece of paper inside a small plastic sheath, and then it's there, nobody's going to be able to remove it. At some point, you can use, if you need to remove it, you can take mineral spirits or similar, and you can remove, that'll dissolve the acryloid, and you can get that removed off of metal. That's one way to go about it. There's other ways. Some people like to use pen markers that use, you can remove the marker material, but they are markers that will use ultraviolet fluorescing ink. And so you can use that with a black light, and you can shine that on there and get the information. Other people like to use things like grease pencils, because they can go ahead and write the materials, like write on the materials someplace with that grease pencil, but then at some point if they have to, they can remove that with very minimal effort. So that's one way to get the materials marked on metal artifacts. Mike's also asking if we plan on putting pictures of some artifacts on the web. We already have some of our artifacts on our webpage. We have a bunch of artifacts that are currently sitting on the webpage that are related to just some different stories. If you go to our main webpage, and up in the doodly-doo up at the top, one of the menus is for collections. If you take a look at that, there is a small presentation that is within that webpage that you can look through that presentation, and there's some really good images of some of the objects in our collection. As we get further in time, as we get closer to opening, we will be presenting some more material on those, and we will be publishing, do some more publicly focused presentations of some of our materials. Right now, we don't have the wherewithal or the staff to be able to do that. This, as one of those things I'm fond of saying, is I can't get my job done because of all the work I have to do. So, Mike, thank you for the questions. Thank you to everybody. Again, if you didn't see it last week, please go back and watch the 9/11 special we did last week. If nothing else, you get a chance to watch me about lose it 3 different times. It was very special, especially getting a chance to interface with some members from the families of the fallen from 9/11. There's now 3 official, 4th is going to be announced probably this next year. I talk about her a little bit in the Facebook Live I did. But we got a chance to really dig into 9/11 and the job that the Marshals did. So if you get a chance, I would definitely recommend you go back and catch that. Otherwise, please, again, go to our webpage, take a look at the Buy a Brick campaign, take a look at our GoFundMe, take a look at the Outpost, the museum store. You can get one of these Marshals Museum face masks for $10. And I will probably have to go out and buy another one. Thanks again to folks like Mike and Sharon, the people who, some of the people who regularly show up to watch this. I know today wasn't really that exciting. It was mainly me sitting here with a talking head, a little bit of show and tell of non-object stuff. But it just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what we do here to get our jobs done. And some of the stuff that I wish I could do more of that in my job than some of the other stuff that I have to do, but all of it helps move the needle. All of it helps get us that much closer to being able to open up this wonderful building to everyone and being able to have our museum experience here so everybody can see it. We're getting closer and closer. we are, again, like I said, we're moving the needle, and we are doing some, there's some people here doing some amazing, wonderful things that I wish I had more time to talk about, but we are getting through this weekend and back at it. Next week on the 24th is the 231st birthday of the Marshals Service. It's the anniversary of the dedication of the building. I very likely next Friday will be talking a little bit about that anniversary, and we're going to be doing some other stuff next week that I think is pretty special. So as we go forward, sorry I had to kind of multitask some different things here, but I know that we've got a lot of stuff going on here, and we're continuing to look at other things that we have to do in order to make sure that we all get our jobs done. So thank you very much again for a wonderful time. If you ever have any questions about my job, about the museum, about anything that's going on here, holler at us through our Facebook page, and we will try to let you in on the world that we do, that we know and love here, and we will try to let you know as we can get closer and closer on being able to show more stuff here. I will, like I said, next Friday, I'll probably be doing something about the anniversary of the Marshals Service, but we are going to get closer and closer as we, if you've got anything particular you want me to talk about or show, give me a question. I'm always happy to take requests if you have particular topics. And other than that, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I hope you continue to support our Facebook Lives. Make sure to invite your friends, share the word. We are always happy to see more people doing friendly faces on the museum page and our Facebook, on Instagram. We're on Twitter, and very definitely for those of you who want to keep seeing me here, let me know if there's topics you want me to hit up. So thank you very much again for coming in, and have a great weekend. Bye-bye. As soon as I get to my next thing. You guys have a wonderful weekend.